Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The turnover started early for the Browns and never stopped Sunday in a 21-7 loss to the Chiefs. Jameis Winston threw three more interceptions, was benched, and may not get back the starting job. If 3 and 11 weren't bad enough, Nick Chubb is done for the season with a broken left foot. At least Myles Garrett was able to return after getting poked in the eye. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of WKYC Morning News. How's it going, Chud?
Well, Scott, I thought about calling off sick on this podcast, but since you see me on TV in the mornings, I can't get away with that. You'd be like, well, why? Why? I'm not saying you because I know that you're not necessarily up at 5 a.m., but I'm sure you could figure it out that I was on. So I,
Chud, there's no benefits on this podcast, buddy. You have no sick days. You have to come in every day.
that's right, exactly. And here I am. I am here. Well, here's the thing. I enjoy talking with you. So, um, but someone was sick on Monday at work, and my little joke back was, well, some would argue the Browns were sick on Sunday, and
Ugh.
they didn't show up. So there you go. Dun dun dun. That's my. But
I'll tell you what,
you
Chud,
pretty
it was bad, buddy.
Yeah, no surprise. It's funny. You picked them to lose by I think a touchdown or more. I had it by four. I was going with the thought that Kansas City um, would not cover because they never do, and the games are always close. And
Right.
I thought the line should have been more like 6 or 7, but it was only four. So I kind of fell into that trap. But then I did put a wager down. I'm not going to lie, and it's legal now.
Yeah, it is.
I took Kansas City -4. I changed my mind right before kickoff, and I actually put something on X that I started thinking. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to overthink this. This is not going to be close today, and it wasn't. Um, it just, you can't turn the ball over 6 times and expect to have a shot against anyone, especially the defending champs.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, Chud. It could have easily been inside the number if Jameis Winston doesn't throw two picks into the end zone. I mean, if the Browns get seven there and or one touchdown and a field goal, all of a sudden it's 21-17, it's close to the number. And that's not even counting the four other turnovers, the increased possessions for the Chiefs, the lack of possessions for the Browns. Two of the touchdowns were on short fields for the Chiefs. The Browns defense played well, and part of that's the Kansas City offense is struggling. But I mean, it's hard to win a game with a -1 turnover margin. -6, it's impossible. So it was just bad, and like I talked about, it's probably the end for Jameis Winston. I completely understand that. How quickly the times change. You're talking about maybe he can be the bridge quarterback next year. Now he's not going to. It looks like he's not going to make it through the season. So that was the story of the game. I mean, besides the injuries and that stuff, it was the turnovers, and it starts with a fumble on the punt after the defense gets a 3-and-out to start the game, and then, like I mentioned, it just never stopped. And Kevin Stefanski's got to be pulling his hair out.
Yeah, you're right. I actually had that in my thoughts to say to you. It felt like it was over right out of the gate. I mean, right away, you didn't feel like that a shot. But here's the thing, though, Scott. I mean, I can understand where you're coming from. But when you say what you say about, well, if this would have happened, well, I'm having flashbacks to last week when you said the same thing. And
Yeah,
I go, well, if ifs and buts were nuts, we'd
yeah,
all be squirrels, right? I mean, so that's been a common theme every week. And at some point, you just have to say, well, it's not really if if this would happen or what, because it just happens every week.
yeah. No, no, you're completely right, Chud. Um, I'm just painting a scenario where it wouldn't have been crazy for this to be a much closer game, or not. It wouldn't have been crazy. It's just easy to see how it
Yeah,
became a 21-7 finish, and you're right. It never felt like the Browns were close, um, because they didn't score into the third quarter, because they kept turning over. I mean, all those reasons. Um, and it's a bad team against a good team, and that's what's supposed to happen. But which is why I get it. You're right. It probably speaks more to a weird line, right? That 4-point line. And I get it. Kansas City's played a ton of close games this year, but a good team versus a bad team. I mean, the Chiefs are 13-1. The Browns are 3-11. The spread should have been bigger than 4 points.
Yeah, it should have been. You're absolutely right. And that's where you can get tricked in on these spreads. So Jameis afterwards basically said you need to watch the film and don't judge the interceptions on the amount of them that, there's a reason why they happened, or, are you buying that? Are you giving him a break on these picks, or it is what it is and the guy's an interception machine?
Well, I agree that each interception is a different story, right? Kevin Stefanski says that all the time. And I think if we break down the three of them, the first one was a bad decision by Winston. The Browns they come out of a timeout. They call a timeout. They come out of it. It's 1st and 10 at the 36, Kansas City 36. And they want to take a shot, or they want to give themselves a chance to take a shot. And they go max protect. So they got an extra, I don't know if it's max, but they got an extra offensive lineman in the block. And it may they want to try to take a deep throw there. Winston commits to it despite there being two guys back. He says he didn't see the backside safety. I watched the replay. I didn't see the All-22, but I watched the TV replay. It doesn't feel like the guy was super deceptive and is running back to get there. When the ball's in the air, there's two guys there, one on each side of Elijah Moore. And if it's only the corner, then yeah, it makes sense to throw that ball. But if you don't, you got to look for that backside corner. There's no doubt there's no question that's the read for Winston is what's this backside safety doing? And he's sitting there waiting for the interception. So I think it's a bad decision on the first interception. The second one to start the third quarter, I mean, it goes off Nick Chubb's hands. So it wasn't a great throw. It was a little to Chubb's left, so it wasn't an easy catch. But I think you can distribute the blame on that one. Part Winston, part Chubb. The third one, he escapes to the right. It's a scramble drill. And he sees Michael Woods one-on-one with the corner. And he wants to give Woods a shot. And I understand that. But what happens is Jerry Jeudy is also coming in that direction. Jameis thought that Woods saw Jeudy, so he kind of pulled up. And Jeudy kind of pulls up. And it allows this Chiefs corner to make a play. So, if it's 50-50 ball and Woods fights for it and doesn't slow down because of Jeudy, maybe it doesn't turn into an interception. So I can understand why Winston might not think that one's all on him. But I think the overall point, which I think you were trying to make, Chud, is when it keeps happening over and over, and it's 8 picks in the last 3 games, it's not, well, this one shouldn't have been me or this one should have been me. You just throw too many interceptions. And he has a history of throwing too many interceptions. And I feel like you can compare it to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's an easy comparison. Mahomes throws balls into coverage. His guys make plays. The Browns drop an interception. Like, that kind of stuff happens. And you go, well, man, and, could you see Winston thinking to himself, why don't his passes turn into interceptions and mine do? And I can get that thinking. I also think it's a percentage thing. It's the odds. Winston does it so many times, throws into coverage so many times that this is going to happen. Whether or not on that particular play it necessarily should have happened, he just does it too often, where Mahomes doesn't do it as often. I think it's just like the odds work out where Winston winds up throwing an absurd amount of interceptions. And it's 12 this season. It's 8 in the last 3 starts. And Kevin Stefanski just reached a point where he couldn't take it anymore. And he yanks him, and I expect him to go to DTR just because if you preach from day one of training camp, can't turn it over, how do you stay with the guy that only turns it over?
Yeah. I mean, listen, he's a backup quarterback in the NFL. He's a good backup quarterback in the NFL that can come in just like he did and get you some wins, gave the city some excitement. And I know there's some people that think DTR should have been the guy right away. I don't have a problem with going with Jameis and taking a look at him and having fun. I mean, he gave us moments. Ultimately, though, this is kind of how, it not kind of. I mean, this is how it plays out for this guy. He's a backup quarterback. Do you agree? I mean, I'm okay with the fact that they gave him a shot and sparked a little electricity in a season that was lost.
I completely agree, Chud. And there's a few reasons. One, I don't think DTR is the answer. So if you thought DTR could be the answer, then I can listen to the argument of going with DTR. I don't think he's the answer. I don't think they think he's the answer. On top of that, I do think Winston gave you the best chance to win. And when you made the switch, the season wasn't over. The Browns had a chance. So I think you go with the guy that you believe gives you the best chance to win. He certainly sparked the offense, which was a welcome change from what we saw for the first 7 games with Deshaun Watson. And with your quarterback situation so unsettled for 2025 and beyond, there was a chance that Winston could play himself into being your starting quarterback next year. And you needed to see him. You needed to see him operate. So I don't have any issue with him being the guy ahead of DTR and starting as long as he did. And I'll even say this, Chud, if they came out whenever the decision comes out, we're taping this Tuesday morning. If it's Tuesday morning, if the news leaks Tuesday or it's Wednesday morning, whatever, and it winds up being Winston, I think you can rationalize that, or maybe explain is a better word, because he does give you a chance. The offense moves. And you're going to go play a Joe Burrow Cincinnati team that is going to put up points. And maybe you think that's the only way you can compete. Now, I don't expect that to be the move, but if they wanted to say that hey, he moves the ball, he gives us a chance, the players love him, I would listen to that explanation. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I would listen to it. And I think the fact that they started him for the previous, 7 games, I have no trouble with that whatsoever.
So this week, you think, though, Scott Petrak going out on a limb here, all right? You think it will be DTR starting?
I do.
And how do you think he'll do?
Well, not well. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's unfair, Doug. He made 3 starts as a rookie. He hasn't started this year. In the 3 starts last year, it was the short notice against the Ravens where Watson kept telling everybody he was going to play, and then, in 90 minutes or 2 hours before the game, all of a sudden I can't go, and it's DTR. Tough assignment. Then he starts against the Steelers. Doesn't play particularly well, but leads that late fourth quarter field goal drive. They win the game. It's a good moment. It's a big moment in the season. Goes to Denver. Doesn't play particularly well. Gets injured, and that's the end of it. He's played a little bit this season. When he came off the bench for Watson against Cincinnati, it just looks too chaotic when he is out there. He's always running around and scrambling and jumping. It doesn't feel controlled at all. And it's a small sample size, and it's difficult spots, like I mentioned, coming off the bench twice this year. And those starts last year, I just don't see enough out of him to think that he's going to be the guy. Maybe with a week to prepare, I'll be wrong. That Cincinnati defense is bad. Maybe that suits up, maybe that bodes well for him. And they can move the ball with him at the quarterback spot. And they can try to go touchdown for touchdown with Joe Burrow because the Bengals defense is bad. I just don't see it, Chud. I think he's too skinny. The arm feels like it's gotten stronger to me. He made a good throw against the Chiefs off the bench. But there's also mistakes. I think it's 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions in his time. I just think he's a backup quarterback in this league. I'd be glad to be proven wrong. I'm fine with him getting the chance. It's 3 weeks and you're 3-11, right? What the heck? But I don't think he's got a super high ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with you. Unfortunately, I really do. I don't even want to bring up Deshaun Watson's name or think about next year at this point. I think we talked about it last week. I just, but I will say this. There was a lot of rumbling last week, Scott. I do believe you and I talked was it Wednesday morning?
Yeah.
You and I said we started talking about how, oh my gosh, I can almost see a scenario where it's Watson, and then there's stories about it and talk about it last week.
Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me? Here we go.
I know. I still don't. I still don't buy it, Chud. I don't think the Browns can be that, for lack of a better word, oblivious and think that he's the guy. And right, I know, and I could be wrong. I mean, that's why I could be wrong. Is it maybe they do? Maybe they really believe that he can resurrect his career. I mean, these are the same guys that made the trade to get him, that paid him all that money. If you're that all in, it's hard to admit you're wrong, and you saw something, and maybe you can keep convincing yourself why it hasn't worked out. So I'm not eliminating that possibility, but I think they have to be aware of how unreliable he's been, just his inability to stay on the field, how average to bad he's been as a player, where his replacements have always looked better than him. I mean, specifically Joe Flacco and Jameis Winston. And, you probably could make a Jacoby Brissett argument in 2022. You don't know when he's coming back from the Achilles. A guy who relies so much on his athleticism and escapability, you would figure that would have an impact. In fact, he's coming off a ruptured Achilles. I think this is important. The fan base hates the guy. So how do you get through? How do you energize, motivate, keep the interest of, not turn off your fan base when I would say a vast majority does not want to see him play again in that uniform? And I get the reality of the contract. I get that there's a great chance that he has to be on this 53-man roster next year if he's healthy. That doesn't mean you have to put him on the field, and it doesn't even mean, in my opinion, that you have to give him a chance to start.
Scott, let me ask you this, though. You talk about how it looks. Do the Haslams, do the front office, I sit and I think about this when I listen to talk radio or I hear the fans complain on social media. Do they care about what the fans think?
I think they do. Now, it's a great question, Chud. I think they do, just like at a base level. But I also believe that they think no matter what happens, the fans will come back. And 0-16 and 1-31 probably prove that. So, if they were 7-10 next year with Deshaun Watson and people were upset all year long, and they switched things out and you had a new quarterback and a new whatever else in 2026, I think they'd assume the fans would come back, and the fans probably would come back. And they're counting on going into a new dome in 2029, which I'm sure they think will generate a ton of excitement. So I think they do care, but they might also think we're smarter than the fans, and they're going to be there regardless because they always have been, no matter what.
Let's move on to Nick Chubb. Obviously, we don't need to tell everyone what a disappointment this is. Anyone listening knows. My wife and daughter and I were talking about it. Even, they were so bummed out to see it happen. I mean, just across the board, how this affects so many fans. But how does it affect him? I mean, Scott, to come back like he has and not even really get back to, I don't even know if he was back to where he wanted to be, if he still was working to get to where he wanted to be.
Right.
Bottom line is, this just has to be devastating for him.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Chud. I think maybe the saving grace is he can shut down that knee and get even healthier. I asked him that question a week ago, and he said, no, it's not a thought in my mind about shutting it down, that he thought he needed all the reps he could get. So I know he's disappointed about that. I know he's disappointed about whatever rehab is going to come with this broken foot. And maybe it's not a crazy rehab because Kevin Stefanski said he doesn't think surgery is necessary. So maybe it's just time, and that time will help, and then he can hit the rehab process, whenever that is, February, March, whenever that is. So maybe there is a silver lining, but I think it was Rodney McLeod yesterday pointed out it's the mental toll of you work so hard to come back, get your
Yeah.
body as well as you can get it, and then this happens. And yeah, that's got to be super tough on him, Chud. There's no doubt about that. Then you have the unknowns of the contract situation. And to me, that's the next thing we have to look at. And I'm kind of working on a column about it is, so this is the last year of his contract. He had restructured the deal, was, took a big pay cut to stay. And I think it's $2.25 million for 2024. But you don't know if he's going to be a number one guy again. I don't think what you saw this year points to that. But sometimes coming off a big knee injury, it takes that second year. So, I think he comes back. I think it makes sense for the Browns to bring him back. He said a week ago, reaffirmed that he wants to come back. So I think the sides try to get done a similar deal. 1 year, a couple $1 million, incentive laden. But you can't. I don't think you, as a team, can go in saying he's going to be the number one. I'm not. I don't think Jerome Ford is a number one, although you see some signs of explosion, explosiveness, and he took that 62-yarder. So then, do you have to go draft a guy next year? I think there's just so many questions on this roster, and that's one of them. And it's like the favorite player on the roster, and the teams and the fans' favorite players. So I would expect that he comes back, and there's a concerted effort to bring him back, but I'm not sure it's guaranteed, just given all the uncertainty around him and the roster and the salary cap.
It's amazing. It's why you're the best. You just answered my next two follow-up questions, all in the original question. I mean, will he be back? And I mean, what do they do? Is Ford the guy? And then it's just like, oh my gosh, is this another thing we got to figure out? They got to go find a running back. They got to find a quarterback. It's like we got to. What are we gonna do? Well, maybe they have a receiver now. I mean, Judy continued to do well, so maybe that's a bright spot. Yeah, just so disappointing for Chubb. What about Garrett? What happened there? Did he just get poked in the eye?
Yeah, he did. That was crazy, John. It winds up not being a huge deal in the game.
What?
Although they did score a touchdown on that play, and he stopped rushing, so who knows if that changes the play. Also, he said, and I agree, it should have been a penalty, illegal hands to the face, even though it was inadvertent, and then maybe you take that touchdown on the board. So I'm not saying it wasn't a key play in the game, but he winds up coming back. He only misses 4 snaps. But all of it was weird. The timing. He plays with a visor, but took it off because it was getting blurry due to the rain. And then he said the first snap, he wasn't sure, but if not one of the first snaps, without the visor, Joe Thuney's hand goes up into his eye. And he's worried because he has LASIK, and you have to be careful when you have LASIK, which is why he wears the visor in the first place. The eye was still swollen and red after the game. He was going to see an eye doctor Monday. It sounds like everything went fine there. So you have all that. And then the fact that he's trying to get to 100 sacks and he got stuck on 99.5 is still at 99.5, even though he was in the backfield all day and chasing Patrick Mahomes, who just knows how to avoid the sack at any means. And it shows the fighter that Myles Garrett is. And I keep saying this, wherever I'm on the radio or the web TV, whatever, that remember when people would question how hard Myles Garrett played? I hope all those people have stopped, because he was obviously in severe pain. He talked about having double vision. Said he could only line up on one side of the line, right or left. He likes to move around because he couldn't see out of the one eye, like when he looked down the line. So that doesn't matter. He comes back and plays, and that's just who he is. And if there were any questions about that early in his career, and maybe some were founded early in his career, to me, those have completely disappeared. And he's the ultimate gamer. He's going to be out there. They're 3-11, and he doesn't care. He's putting all his effort into it, and I think that should be recognized.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. And as he's pointed out, you never know. I mean, everyone's got to find their reason to keep playing. And, that's could be to audition for another team, maybe to get another sack for a record, just because you want to win a game. I mean, just whatever the reasons. He always talks about that. So, yeah, good point by you. Next thing I want to hit is, Scott, I think you and I have worked together for a long time, and I think you know that I don't have all the answers, and when I don't, I'll ask questions and I'll go back and forth and everything. But when I am pretty steadfast on something, I stick with it and I harp on it, and I feel really confident about it. And I have many examples I can give, but I'm not going to, because people are like, "Oh, you say it all the time." But I'm putting this in the next category. But now I'm starting to wonder if I'm way off. I completely think Kevin Stefanski should be back next year, and I think he will be. And I think it's ridiculous if he's not. But now, like, someone came up to me at work the other day and said, "Hey, should we be worried about Black Monday?" I'm hearing it on the radio. People say he should be gone. I'm starting, Scott, like, is Stefanski maybe going to be gone?
I don't think he will be. I'm certainly not ruling it out. I checked in with somebody over the weekend who said he believes that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski return. And we know that Jimmy Haslam told ESPN at the owners' meetings last week that he believes he has the right pieces in place. I think they want to, when I say the ownership wants continuity. They want stability. They just gave Berry and Stefanski extensions in the offseason. They don't want to blow it up again. I think at their core, really like these guys and think they're smart. Now, if you're 3-11, everything gets called into question. And I'm not the believer that one bad season means you blow stuff up. This has been a really bad season. I understand people wanting change. I get that. I don't think Stefanski should go. I think he's a good coach. I think we've seen that time and again. And especially last year when they went 11-6, went to the playoffs, and we know how many injuries and the quarterback situation they had. I think Andrew Berry's a different discussion. The roster, there's plenty of hits, plenty of misses in his 5 years here. Do you trust him to take a top 10 pick and go find your next quarterback and all those things? Like, these are serious questions. I would say 3-11, I still expect both guys to come back. That could change, Chud. And who knows, maybe these final 3 games will have an impact on that decision. That remains to be seen. So I would never guarantee in this type of season that anybody's coming back, even though I think that's how the organization's leaning.
Yeah, Scott, I tend to agree with pretty much everything you just said there. And as I was sitting there this week listening to different things, and I thought, there's many reasons why I feel he shouldn't go, but I can't understand the point to the people that say he should. But this is where my concern was. So far, they have not quit on him. And I still think, even though the Chiefs game was ugly, it still wasn't one of those 42-3 or a complete, like, it's because they gave up. I mean, it's because you had 6 turnovers. It's not because, you quit on 12 plays or, you know what I mean? Like, I still feel like they're playing for him. Now, if they come out in these next 3 games and something changes, that could be an issue for him. But, I would really like to see him get another try. And, I don't know who they would replace him with, but boy, it's just frustrating to know all of the topics and questions we're going to have, as the weeks go on and then in the off season.
There's no doubt, Chud. And I think with Stefanski, like, I get it. I get the criticism. I get the frustration. You look at some of those penalties and you go, hey, that's the coach and that's discipline. And they had a bunch of penalties last year and they have them again this year. And it's almost like the interceptions, Chud. You can explain away some of them. And that officiating crew called a bunch of penalties, and Joe Batonio called a couple of the alignment things ticky-tack. And I don't blame Stefanski because Jamari Thrash lines up off sides. I mean, he's a receiver. Like you got to know better. But as a big picture, you can't have that many penalties. And that does come down to discipline and it comes down to coaching. So I get that. To me, it's not enough of a reason to change coaches. I think you do have to take a step back and say quarterback play has been terrible all year. And is that the coach's fault? And I would argue it's not. Whether or not he wanted, Deshaun Watson here in the first place, I feel like he's saddled with Watson. And then he's given Jameis Winston, who throws a bunch of interceptions. So I would bring back Kevin Stefanski. I think he is a good coach, and I think he will continue to be a good coach if he's here or if he's somewhere else. The Andrew Berry discussion, like I mentioned, I think is a more interesting one. And what adds to that is if you decide to split that tandem up, and one of the things Jimmy Haslam or the Haslams have liked so much is that those guys are on the same page, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. And if you separated those guys, how would it change the dynamics of the organization? And do you saddle the new GM with a coach that he may or may not want? I mean, those are some issues that you'd have to get into if the Haslams wanted to make only a partial teardown of the organization. And we can get into this more as the season goes on or even after the season. But like those are kind of things that you're thinking about when it's continuity or a total teardown or a partial teardown. And when I say teardown, I'm talking about staff, organization, let alone the roster.
So speaking of coaches, before we go, I just wanted to get your opinion on Bill Belichick. How about that?
It's a stunner to me, Chud. And I know that we talked to Bubba Ventrone and Jim Schwartz, and I talked to Pierre Strong, and they were convinced that he's going to be a smashing success just because he's such a great coach. I have issues. I don't know if he can relate to 18-year-olds. I don't know. I don't see him having the stomach to recruit and to recruit his own guys so they don't enter the transfer portal. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he gets people to come because he's Bill Belichick, and they stay because he's Bill Belichick, and he starts churning out NFL guy after NFL guy. I have questions about it.
It certainly is going to be interesting to see. I mean, you're right. All those points. I just, it came out of nowhere, right? I mean, does it have to do with his childhood, with his dad? Didn't his dad?
Yeah, I mean, that's what – I mean, it could be genuine. It could also be just, not an excuse, but a connection. But, yeah, he grew up there. His dad was a coach there. I don't think he grew up his whole career there, but when he was young, his dad was an assistant at North Carolina. I think part of it is, his son, Steve, is the defensive coordinator at Washington, and this feels almost like there's a succession plan that Belichick's going to take over, that he's going to be the coach, and then at some point hand it over to Steve Belichick. I mean, Bubba Ventrone, the Browns special teams coordinator, said as much. He goes, wherever Steve Belichick's the coach, I'm going to send his soon-to-be 11-year-old son. Well, that was in response to a question about Bill Belichick at Carolina. So I think there's a bigger plan in place. It's just going to be interesting to see how it works. Does he bail and go to the NFL if there's an opportunity next year in the NFL? He's got a buyout in his contract. It's going to be really interesting to watch how all of it plays out.
Wow, that's interesting. You could be right. A bigger story to this. And it's not like he went to another successful NFL team or even a powerhouse in college. I mean, this is North Carolina. This is not college basketball.
Right. And exactly. And that's another layer to this. Now, I do think some of the people talk about how, no one ever talks about North Carolina football. That's a little over the top. I mean, Drake May was the number 3 pick in the draft, and he went to Carolina. Right? Mitch Trubisky was the number 2 pick in the draft 5 years or however many years ago, 6 years ago. He was the number 2 pick in the draft. He went to North Carolina. Right? LT, Julius Peppers went to Carolina. It's not like nobody's ever heard of this program. Now, it's never been on the same level as a football team. It's not in Alabama and LSU and Ohio State. But I did find that part of the narrative a little interesting.
All right. Anything else before we go to prediction?
Nope.
All right. No, we both got it right last week. I'm 8-6. You're 5-9. The Browns are 3-11.
I got 2 games on the Browns.
Hey, you got a glass half full, buddy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, I think I went first last week. I'll let you go first this week.
All right. My thought here is, Chud, and I hit on it a little bit earlier. I'm not sure DTR can keep up with Joe Burrow. Not sure. I don't think he can keep up with Joe Burrow. I don't care how bad the Bengals defense is. Now, the Browns defense played well against Patrick Mahomes. Historically, has been good against Joe Burrow. So maybe that levels it out and this game is close. I have concerns about the Browns secondary with, Martin Emerson Jr. has a concussion, so he left the game against the Chiefs. If he's not back and Greg Newsome is already on IR, then it's Denzel Ward, who we know is fantastic, but Cam Mitchell, rookie Myles Garrett, who made his debut against the Chiefs and was forced into service. That's a tough ask for Chase and Higgins and the rest of those Cincinnati receivers. So I think it's a tough matchup. The Bengals still have something to play for. They have not been eliminated. They're still hanging around that graphic that they show on TV during all these games. And Burrow's playing out of his mind. So I'm going to go Bengals 27, Browns 20. It might be the same score I had last week, but I'm sticking with it.
27-20. I think it is.
Yeah, consistent.
It is. Hey, did you see the things on social media, like Burrow all upset in this last game? I think it was from this last game. Like, did you catch that by chance?
I mean, I saw him. Oh, no, I saw him last week when he was upset because his house got robbed. I didn't see this after the Tennessee game. What was going on?
I'm assuming it was after this week's game, but I mean, they won.
Right.
So I don't know. I didn't dig in enough to see what he was upset about, but one of them was, expletive kidding me.
Oh,
and then another one was like, "Well, trade me to Seattle." I don't know.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's all legit or not.
Yeah,
you can get fooled on social media.
I'm sure the trade me to Seattle is not legit. I haven't gone back and watched that game, their game from Sunday yet. But I watched the week before, and he's playing at a crazy level.
Yeah, he really is. Just absolutely nuts. Well, yeah, I'm picking the Bengals too. I mean, I don't think many people should be picking the Browns here. What's the line? Was it 6? What did I see? 7?
I think I saw 7 this morning. Yeah.
I think I saw 7 this morning. Yeah, 7. Over under 47.5. My concern is as bad as the Bengals defense is, I could see this being the game where they get right, where like the Browns just, you're going on the road, your season's over, DTR, I don't know. Something tells me that the Bengals defense isn't going to give up like 35 to the Browns.
Yeah.
So, there's that. And you make great points about the defense, how well Burrow's playing. I'm going to go Bengals 31, Browns 21.
Okay. I like that score. I mean, who knows, Chuck? Maybe there's been some crazy Browns-Bengals games.
True.
The 58-48. I think there might have been a 48-45 game. Maybe it turns into one of those, and that would be fun to watch. This is a game that was flexed from Thursday night to Sunday at 1 o'clock. So, and I get that. I completely understand why they moved this game out of prime time for the nation to watch. But I think it has that potential. I'm not ready to pick that, but I think there's a potential that it's kind of one of those fun games. Hopefully it is.
Yeah. Well, you make a good point. They have had some good battles. So, and listen, I mean, Scott, let me ask you this. I mean, if the Browns won, would you be surprised?
Yeah, I think I would be.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I said that all year, Chud. This feels like I would be surprised if they won. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You don't see a scenario where, with the Bengals defense being so bad, they could find a way.
No, and I don't want this to sound like I'm just criticizing DTR the whole time. And maybe he proves me wrong. And again, I admit that it's been a small sample size. I just haven't seen enough to think that he can go anywhere close to toe with Joe Burrow. And I think Jameis Winston could. And like I mentioned earlier, that's one of the reasons at least I would have considered sticking with Winston. So maybe I'll be wrong, but I've seen nothing that makes me think DTR can put up 27 against anybody. So
Yeah. Don't disagree. All right. Well, there you go. That's another week. How many more we got of these? We got 3 more, right?
pods?
Well, 3 more
games? Yeah, we got 3 more post-game pods.
Yeah.
And then, do we have coaching fired pod? Do we hopefully not, but well, who knows? So yeah, so we got 3 more likely to be post-mortems coming, John.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
Well, I will tell you this. I got to go on record is I'm off next week, so I might be a short pod.
Love it. It is Christmas week, isn't it, next week?
Yeah, it is.
Christmas Eve Tuesday, for crying out loud? It is.
That's right.
My gosh, I can't make you work on Christmas Eve, Judge. Jeez,
1 week from today is Christmas Eve.
Well, we're going to have to figure out if we can get a 20-minute Monday pod or something. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
All right.
Actually, it would have just been easier if they played on Thursday.
It would have. Yeah. No kidding. I would have had the weekend off. I could have done some Christmas shopping.
Yeah, true. Are you going to Cincinnati?
Yeah, I'll go down to Cincinnati, and I'll tell you what, there's a bunch of football on Saturday. I mean, this is, it's a whatever 3.5, 4-hour drive. I haven't thought about the planning and the weather and that kind of thing, but there's the Steelers Chiefs at 1:00. Or no, that's Christmas is Steelers Chiefs, but there's NFL games Saturday. There's Ohio State Saturday night. There's other college football games during the day Saturday. Like it's a kind of day where I want to be in front of the TV starting at 1:00. So I'm gonna have to get up early and drive. I might have to stay up late and finish writing. I got some stuff I got to figure out by.
You got problems, man. You got some things to figure out.
No, you thought you had it rough, buddy.
You got Texans Chiefs at 1, Steelers Ravens at 4:30.
Steelers Ravens, that's right. So I got to definitely be in front of a TV by then, and that's not even the college football games.
No, college football is Ohio State at 8. They're a 7-point favorite over Tennessee. That's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, talk about the potential for big changes after a game.
First ever game in Columbus, I think, in December.
It's got to be. That's really interesting too. Well, we'll see what the weather's like there. I keep hearing. I always say I'm a Big Ten guy. You always hear the Big Ten guys talk about wait till we get the SEC schools up here in the winter. Well, they're going to have one.
They're going to have one,
and it could be weather. So it's going to be interesting to see if that how that comes into play.
Then you're going to have Penn State at noon against SMU, and Texas Clemson at 4. What's interesting? The NFL, when they do these Saturday games, it was typically brought in because the college football season was done. There'd be bowl games, but they wouldn't be big bowl games, or they'd stagger the times. But This is interesting. I mean, literally, you're going to have 2 college football playoff games going on while 2 NFL games are going on.
I know. It feels like the NFL said, "Yeah, we're not giving it up." This has been our week. We're not giving up for college football. So that's really interesting. And I think a couple of the college games might be on TNT. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to check the ratings. That's your kind of thing, Chud. In the TV business. But see, I would assume the NFL dwarfs college football, but maybe it doesn't.
Wait, say that again?
I would think the NFL has better ratings than that
Yes.
like significantly better. But maybe
agree.
not Ohio State. Maybe Ohio State has a big rating Saturday night. I don't know.
Well, but they won't be going up against the NFL.
Okay, well there you go. All right, perfect.
Because the NFL games the Ravens Steelers should wrap up by 7:30.
I got you. So there's no third NFL game on Saturday night. I got you. Well,
I don't see one.
That works out well for my viewing habits.
Yeah, no, it works out. Ohio State's on ABC, ESPN. Clemson in Texas is on TNT. Penn State SMU is on TNT.
Okay.
So there you go.
No.
Well, the NFL doesn't. Yeah, the NFL doesn't care about anyone else. I mean, they're taking over Christmas now.
They're taking over Christmas, Friday nights from the high schools, all of it. Right?
They just, yep.
So.
Yep, NFL, the king.
It is. It
All
really is. Thanks, bud. I appreciate it as always. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast. And you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.